Hi, my name is Pazuru and welcome to my channel where I investigate anything spooky, mysterious, cryptic, or morbid. Today on the channel we'll be looking into one of the most famous unsolved murders in modern history, the Black Dahlia murder. But before we get into all the little details, please like and subscribe. It's free, it takes 2 seconds, and you can always unsubscribe later if you want. January 15th, 1947, at around 11 a.m., Betty Bersinger decided to take her child on a walk down Norton Avenue in Los Angeles, California. Eventually, they reached a vacant lot near Leimert Park, and Betty notices what looks like a mannequin, posed lying on the ground. But upon further inspection, Betty realizes this is no mannequin. This is the bisected body of a woman lying discarded in the lot. After this realization, Betty rushes to alert the police. Police arrive and started inspecting the crime scene. The body itself was drained of blood, explaining why Betty mistook the body for a mannequin. This and the lack of blood around the lot caused the police to believe that the murder happened elsewhere. The body was also cut clean in half at the waist. Some of the organs, such as the intestines, instead of being inside the body still, were placed neatly underneath her buttocks. There were also pieces of flesh around her thighs and breasts that had been cut away, and on her face there was a smile cut from the corners of her mouth to her ear. This smile is commonly known as a Glasgow smile, which is a torture method that Scotland's early gangs used in the 1800s. These clean cuts on her body also caused investigators to believe that the killer had some amount of medical know-how. Near the body, investigators found a heel print as well as a cement sack with traces of blood that they presume was used to transport the body to the lot. Autopsy reports of the body show that there were marks suggesting the woman had been bound and tortured before she died. Her stomachs also were full of feces, leading some to believe she was forced to eat feces before she was killed. There is also pieces of her skin from her thigh that used to be a rose tattoo that was cut off and shoved inside her vagina. Her official cause of death was cerebral hemorrhaging and shock. The LAPD ended up sending the body's fingerprints to the FBI using an early version of the fax machine called a sound photo, and within 56 minutes, they had an identity for the body: Elizabeth Short. Elizabeth Short was born on July 29, 1924, to parents Cleo and Phoebe Short. She was the third of 5 children the couple had. The family resided peacefully in Medford, Massachusetts until Cleo ends up abandoning the family when Elizabeth was 5 years old. He was presumed dead as his car was found near the Charlestown Bridge and everybody assumed that he had jumped. At age 15, Elizabeth started to suffer from bronchitis and severe asthma attacks, causing her to need surgery and doctors to suggest that Elizabeth should relocate to milder climates to help prevent her respiratory problems. This caused her mother to send her to family friends in Miami, Florida for the next 3 winters. In 1942, Elizabeth's mother, Phoebe, received a letter from her father, Cleo, apologizing for abandoning the family. He revealed that he was in fact alive and had started a new life in California. At age 18, Elizabeth moved to California to live with her father in Vallejo in December of 1942. However, this arrangement did not last long, as after multiple arguments with her father, she moved out in January of 1943. She then took a job as a clerk at the commissary of the Army's Camp Cook near Lompoc, California, in January 1943, which would be the first time her fingerprints were recorded. Here she briefly lived with a U.S. Army Air Force sergeant who reportedly abused her. She then moved to Santa Barbara, where she was arrested on September 23, 1943, for underage drinking, which was where her fingerprints were recorded for the second time. Authorities sent Elizabeth back to Massachusetts after this, but instead, Short decided to return to Florida. In Florida, Short met Major Matthew Michael Gordon Jr., who was a decorated Air Force officer who was training for deployment to Southeast Asia for World War II. Short claims that Gordon had proposed to her in a letter that he wrote while recovering from injuries from a plane crash in India. She accepted the proposal, but unfortunately Gordon died in a second plane crash on August 10, 1945. In July of 1946, Short upped again to California, this time moving to Los Angeles so she could visit an acquaintance from Florida, who was another Air Force officer member who was stationed in Long Beach. She spent the last 6 months of her life in Southern California, but mostly in Los Angeles, renting a room from behind the Florentine Gardens nightclub on Hollywood Boulevard and working as a waitress. She was said to have been an aspiring actress during her time in the area before she died at the age of 22. Once the FBI identified the body as Short, the FBI decided to release the mugshot from when she was arrested for underage drinking to the press. This caused the press to start reporting on every detail about Short that they possibly could. The media was hungry for any little piece of information they could get on Elizabeth that reporters from the Los Angeles Examiner went as far as to call Elizabeth's mother Phoebe and lie to her, saying that Elizabeth had won a beauty contest to get more information about the deceased from her mother. After the reporter pried as much personal information as they could from Phoebe, they finally alerted her that her daughter was murdered, which I find so distasteful that it took them prying all the information they could out of her to finally alert her that her daughter was now deceased. The more the media learned about Elizabeth's history, the more they branded her as a sexual deviant, nicknaming her the Black Dahlia because she preferred to wear sheer black clothes, had striking black hair, and because of the movie The Blue Dahlia that was out at the time. This wasn't helped by an officer saying this victim knew at least 50 men at the time of her death, and at least 25 men had been seen with her in the 60 days preceding her death. She was known to be a teaser of men. False rumors even started to spread that she was a prostitute and that she liked to tease men because she was a lesbian, which both are not true. On January 21st, 1947, the Examiner received a call from a person claiming to be the Black Dahlia's murderer, and that they stated they would send her belongings to the news in the mail as proof. A few days later, on the 24th, a manila envelope addressed to the Los Angeles Examiner and other Los Angeles papers was found. The envelope included a letter that used cut-out words from newspaper clippings that said, "Here is Dahlia's belonging," as well as Short's birth certificate, business cards, photographs, names written on a piece of paper, and an address book. All the contents were cleaned with gasoline. There was one fingerprint found on the envelope, however, it was never identified. Due to all the contents, as well as how it was cleaned, the police believe that the letter was indeed sent by Short's killer. 2 days later, on January 26, a handwritten note was received that read, "Here it is. Turning in. Wednesday, January 29th, 10 a.m. Had my fun at the police. Black Dahlia Adventure." And it included a location. The police showed up to the location on the day and time stated, but the writer never showed. Later, the Examiner received another note, this time written with cut letters from a magazine, that stated, "Have changed my mind. You would not give me a square deal. Dahlia killing was justified." Police then turned their attention to the address book received in the manila envelope. It included the contact information of about 75 men, but all the men questioned claimed to only have known Short for a short time. Police also investigated USC Medical School, as it was close to where the body was found, and the body was likely killed by somebody with medical know-how. But the investigation did not further the case. Over 50 people came forward to confess to the killing of Short, but after police review, all came back as false. The LAPD eventually admitted the lack of eyewitnesses and hard evidence ended up hindering the progress of solving the murder. Many assume it may have been a date gone wrong, or that Short may have simply run into the wrong person late at night while walking home. But now, let's head into more specific theories. Our first theory believes that Leslie Dillon and Mark Henson committed the Black Dahlia murder. It is believed that Dillon, who worked as a bellhop and an errand boy for Mark Henson, murdered Short on behalf of Mark, who owned a local nightclub and movie theater. Both Henson and Dillon were prime suspects in the case that were both let go by police. Mark apparently was the original owner of the address book that was sent to the newspaper in a manila envelope, and he claims to have given Short the address book as a gift. Short was reported to have stayed with Henson for a few nights, and he was also reported to be one of the last people to have spoken to her before her death on a phone call that was made on January 8th. Now, the reason Mark Henson wanted her dead varies. The first reason states that Mark was infatuated with Elizabeth and came on to her, but Elizabeth rejected Mark's advancements, causing Mark to want her dead. The other reason that Mark may have wanted Short dead was because she knew too much about the men's involvement in robbery schemes targeting hotels in the area, and they wanted her out of the picture. Either way, the theory goes that Leslie, who had previously worked as a mortician's assistant, was the one to have killed Short, as he had the medical know-how to bleed a body dry. It is believed that Dylan killed Elizabeth at Astor Motel near the University of South California, as there was a crime scene found there by the owner of the motel on January 15th, 1947. Henry Hoffman, the owner of the motel, claimed that on January 15th he opened the door to one of his cabins and found the room covered in blood and fecal matter, and in another cabin he found that someone left a bundle of women's clothes wrapped in a brown paper bag which also had been stained with blood. Because Hoffman had been arrested 4 days prior for beating his wife, he decided he didn't want to risk another interaction with the police. He decided that instead of reporting the crime, he would just clean up the crime scene, which is something to do for sure. I don't understand the logic here at all. Yeah. Dylan also knew details about the crime that hadn't been released to the public yet, such as the fact that Short had a tattoo of a rose on her thigh that had been cut out and shoved inside her vagina. Dylan claimed he was an inspiring crime writer and told authorities he was writing a book about the Black Dahlia case, which is why he knew that much about the case. This book, by the way, was never written. It is thought that Dylan was released because Mark had ties with some of the cops at the LAPD. Our next theory comes from author Donald H. Wolfe, who theorizes that Elizabeth Short was murdered by a mobster named Benjamin Bugsy Siegel at the request of Norman Chandler, the publisher of the Los Angeles Times. Wolfe believes that Chandler had a sexual relationship with Short, and when she got pregnant, he hired Siegel to kill Short. Wolfe claims that he came to this conclusion because of a man he knew growing up named Uncle Vern. Vern supposedly worked for the mobster and would often suggest that Siegel could have something to do with the murder. As how they got away with it, Wolfe suspects that since both Siegel and Chandler were powerful people at the time, the police helped cover it up. Next, we have a theory from Janice Knowlton, who suspects her father, George Knowlton, had been Black Dahlia's killer. Janice started to claim in 1991 that she started to remember memories she had been suppressing for years. These memories were that her father had sexually harassed her and that she witnessed her father kill Elizabeth Short. She claims she knew Short by the moniker Aunt Betty and that she saw her father beat Betty to death with a claw hammer at their home in Westminster, California when she was 10 years old. Janice claims that her father George forced her to go with him to dispose of the body. However, many have discounted her claims, such as her own stepsister, who calls it trash and stated she believed it, but it wasn't reality. I know because I lived with her father for 16 years. On top of this, police also don't believe the claims, as Janice's statement isn't consistent with the facts of the case. And I also agree that this theory is very off the wall, and I don't subscribe to it whatsoever. The next theory is that the last person to have seen Elizabeth alive, Robert Red Manley, killed Elizabeth. Robert was a married pipe clamp salesman who met Elizabeth in 1946 when he struck up conversation with her at a street corner. Manley states, "I asked her if she wanted a ride. She turned her head and wouldn't look at me. Finally, she turned around and asked me if I didn't think it was wrong to ask a girl on a corner to get into my car." This started their relationship. Later, Short needed a place to stay after the holidays, so she sent Manley a message and asked him to pick her up. They ended up staying at a hotel together, though Manley claims that nothing was going on between them. Manley then drove Short back to Los Angeles. Short apparently lied to him and said that she was going to meet her sister at the Biltmore Hotel on January 9th. Manley ended up accompanying her to the hotel. But when Short's sister failed to show up by 6:30 p.m., Manley left Short to go home to his family. The police ended up putting Manley through a polygraph test, and he passed. After the murder, Manley spent the rest of his life struggling with his mental health and was committed in 1954 by his wife as he was hearing voices. Doctors that same year gave Manley sodium pentothal, which allegedly makes people more truthful, and Manley stuck to his story. Personally, I believe Manley ended up having some survivor's guilt, as he was the last person with Short before she died, and it may have been possible that he believes if he had stayed with Short, she might have lived, leading to his mental health problems. But that is just my theory and in no way based in fact. It's just from what I've read. It kind of sounds like he might be struggling because of the guilt. Our next theory comes from former Los Angeles Times columnist Larry Harnish. Harnish believes that Dr. Walter Bailey killed the Black Dahlia, as while he was digging into the case, he found some connections between Bailey and Elizabeth Short. The information he found was that Bailey's daughter knew Short's sister, and that the doctor had an office near Biltmore Hotel, which is where Short was last seen, and that her body was dumped a block away from Bailey's ex-wife's house. To further the idea that it was Bailey matched the description of Short's killer drawn by FBI profile John Douglas, as he was desensitized to blood, was comfortable with a knife, had a medical degree, and had a strong link to the vicinity of the crime. Harnish believes that the doctor may have crossed paths with Elizabeth either by coincidence or by the fact that he was a family friend that she had reached out to as she was near broke at the time, and spent a few days with her. And then something happened for Bailey to have a fit of rage and kill Short, possibly Short rejecting him. This rejection, mixed with alcohol and lingering anger at his ex-wife, may have caused Bailey to go into a murderous rage, killing Short. And what better way to terrorize your ex-wife than by leaving a dead body by her house? That would be some next level crazy if your ex just dumped a dead body by your house to terrorize you. Next, we have a theory proposed by a childhood friend of Elizabeth Short, Mary Pacios. Pacios grew up with Short in Medford, Massachusetts, and started researching the case to stop rumors that Short had been a sex worker. Pacios said that Orson Welles' name popped up a few times while she was researching, and she concluded that Welles may have a condition called diphasic personality, which is a condition often contributed to serial killers, which is when someone can become violent and aggressive when frustrated. She also points out a magic act that Welles performed in the 1940s where he pretended to cut a woman in half. She also points out mannequins Welles designed with mutilated faces like Short's, and that these mannequins were designed 3 months prior to the murder. And our last theory comes from a former police detective named Steve Hodel, who, after retiring from the LAPD, publishes a book where he lays out the details of the investigation and presents his own theory that his own father, Dr. George Hodel, killed Elizabeth Short. It started in 1999 after his father's death. Steve went through his father's things and noticed 2 photos of a woman who looked strikingly similar to Elizabeth Short. After finding these images, Steve used his police skills to investigate his own father. Steve had a handwriting expert compare his father's handwriting to the note that was allegedly sent from the killer. The analysis concluded that there was a strong possibility that Steve's father and the killer were the same, but the results were not conclusive evidence. On top of that, the Black Dahlia crime scene photos showed that Short's body had been cut in a way that matches a hemicorectomy, a medical procedure that cuts the body below the lumbar spine. This procedure was taught in medical schools in the 1930s, which would align with the time that Hodel's father, a doctor, would have been in medical school. Even more compelling, Steve found a folder full of receipts for contracting work on his childhood home while searching his father's archives at UCLA. In this folder, Steve found receipts for a large bag of concrete that was the same size and brand as the one found near Elizabeth's body, that was dated a few days before the murder. He eventually published this information in Black Dahlia Adventure, the true story. Later, Steve Lopez, a Los Angeles Times columnist, started to fact-check the book. He ended up requesting official files from the case and made an interesting discovery. The LAPD actually had 6 suspects they settled on shortly after the murder, one of the 6 being George Hodel. Apparently, he was such a prime suspect in the case that his home was actually bugged in the 50s so police could monitor him. A lot of the audio caught from his house was nothing to really note except for one chilling exchange that happened at 8:25 p.m. The exchange goes, "Woman screamed. Woman screamed again. It should be noted that the woman was not heard before the scream." And later, Hodel was heard saying, "Realized there was nothing I could do. Put a pillow over her head and cover her with a blanket. Get a taxi. Expired 12:59. They thought there was something fishy. Anyway, now they may have figured it out. Killed her. And supposing I did kill the Black Dahlia, they couldn't prove it now. They can't talk to my secretary anymore because she's dead." Even with this evidence that George Hodel, and possibly his secretary, killed Short, the case still remains open. Steve Hodel even goes as far to claim that he found evidence that can connect his father to multiple other murders, implying his father could have been a serial killer. This research even caught the attention of law enforcement, as in 2004, Stephen R. Kay, the head deputy for the LA County's District Attorney Office, said that he would have enough evidence to arrest George Hodel for Elizabeth's murder. So, for my personal opinion, it is that multiple people killed the Black Dahlia. I believe that Dr. George Hodel definitely played a hand in her death, along with, at the very least, Leslie Dillon, because he did know too much information about the scene of the crime that was not known to the public. I also personally believe that this case is a lot more like the Junko Furuta case from Japan, where multiple men ended up torturing Junko Furuta for some twisted gratification. And that is just like my personal opinion and beliefs that I have come up with as I researched this case and are in no way fact. But at the end of the day, we will probably never truly understand what happened to Elizabeth Short. Thank you for watching, and I just wanted to pop in at the end here just to remind everyone to please subscribe and like the video. It really helps. And for all of you to have a lovely day and to stay safe. Bye.